Welcome back to Order Militarist Radio TV. And our next topic is on who is General George Patton and the mysterious death or the assassination of the general. Now, this one's personal because, well, my grandpa on my dad's side, Tech Sergeant Harold J. Ballman, was one of the head mechanics in the 3rd Armored Division under General George Patton, and was the man who got the car ready for the morning hunt that fateful day. Was it a normal car accident, or as we think, even in Bill O'Reilly's book, Killing Patton, hints at it was no accident, and they wanted Patton off the scene because we know Patton hated the communist forces and didn't trust them. And if he could have, he would have drove into Russia and conquered communist Russia to remove that threat to America and to the world. Yeah.
It's a very, very interesting mystery. Very curious. And I've watched, I think, 2 documentaries on it and studied the events. And I have to say that I'm convinced that he was assassinated. Okay. And I think it's more than highly probable. It served a lot of geopolitical interests, a lot of national political interests of people who are known to have been not virtuous people, let us say. It's an aspect of American history you almost never hear about. And the people behind it were so committed to what they did that when that great movie came out on Patton, they were outraged. They were outraged about that film, which is one of the most popular films ever made in about an American general. And everyone likes watching it over and over and over, even though it kind of maybe lionizes him a bit more than life.
Yeah.
They were outraged by that film because they didn't want him glorified. He had his enemies were still alive. And so it's an interesting topic. I'm glad we're going to talk about it because I think everyone needs to know it, because we need to see the reality of what America is, and not in the sense of the nation, but the kind of people that have been running it a long time.
Yeah.
Excuse me while I eat some of my dinner here while we're talking.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I was hoping we'd have some military guys call in so I could ask them the questions, because I just have the questions and I guess I didn't link anything to it. So,
Well, we can still talk about it. I know something about it. Maybe we'll first talk about who was Patton and why anyone would want him dead.
yeah. Okay. George Smith Patton Jr., born November 11th, 1885, died December 21st, 1945. He was born to a family whose members served in the United States and Confederate States armies. When he was in school, it was possible that he had a learning disability, because he had difficulty learning to read and write. he was he went to he was enrolled in Stephen Clark School for Boys, a private school in Pasadena for 6 years. Patton was described as an intelligent boy and was widely read on classical military history, particularly the exploits of Hannibal, Scipio Africanus, Julius Caesar, Joan of Arc, and Napoleon Bonaparte, as well as those of family friend John Singleton Mosby. We frequently stopped by the Patton family home when George was a child. He was also a devoted horseback rider. um, let's see. When he became old enough to go to high school, he studied at the Virginia Military Institute. Um, what what do you know about this school?
It was considered one of the finest military schools for in the United States, and a lot of great generals studied there, great military officers. Patton was like the cream of the American military, in the sense that he was a very intelligent man. He was very well liked. He was a very great personality. His troops always loved him. He had a military career that led him to the highest positions of trust and confidence among the Allies in the Second World War. Um, so that institute really had a lot to do. They were excellent institute, the Virginia Military Institute, and they're one of the, like I'd say, the last great institutions of the South. Although by this time you have to understand that they're part of the United States and they're not promoting the Confederacy. They were just a military institute. Yeah. I guess we'd call them like a military high school.
It was also portrayed in a serious but also very funny movie with Damon Williams, I think it was, Major Payne, where he was just trying to get back into the regular Marine Corps to go back to his unit and get, back into action. But he was selected to be the guy in charge to get these cadets in line. Well, it's a beautiful campus, and this campus and another one are rivals, and they do uh, so-called secret missions where they steal like the not the mascot like you do in normal college prank stuff, but they try to steal the cup that they have to win at the military games. So it's you get to see a little bit about the how it was in the '90s in that movie. Um, and
It was while he was a student at the Virginia Military Institute that a senator from California nominated him for West Point. So it was his launching pad for his military career.
yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. Competed in the sport. He competed in the sword a sword team and track and field, and specialized in modern pen- pentathlon.
Pentathlon.
Yeah, 5 different events: fencing, freestyle swimming, equestrian show jumping, and final combined event of pistol shooting and cross country running.
At the 1912 Summer Olympics, you're
Yeah,
talking, right?
in Stockholm, Sweden. He finished 5th place, right behind 4 Swedes.
Okay, so that means he was the best of the internationals there.
Yeah. Patton graduated number 46 out of 103 cadets at West Point on June 11, 1909, and received a commission as second lieutenant in the cavalry branch of the United States Army.
Mhm. You know, his ancestry might make him a relative, AJ. Do you know he's descended from England's King Edward I through Edmund's son, Edmund of Woodstock, the first Earl of Kent?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
The, the family said was descended from 16 barons who had signed the Magna Carta. So, yeah, so.
Oh yeah, he's a relative.
So the fact that your great granddad worked on his car might have been uh, a wonderful historical coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
His
Yeah.
paternal grandfather was George Smith Patton, who commanded the 22nd Virginia Infantry under Jubal Early in the Civil War. His paternal grandfather, George Smith Patton, was killed at Pickett's Charge in the Battle of Gettysburg.
Wow.
And then he traces his lineage also back to a Hugh Mercer, who was killed at the Battle of Princeton in the American Revolution. And his own father was also a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute.
And his father became a lawyer and later district attorney of Los Angeles County. Patton's maternal grandfather was Benjamin Davis Wilson, a merchant who had been the second mayor of Los Angeles. His father was a wealthy rancher and lawyer who owned a 1,000-acre ranch near Pasadena, California. Patton is also a descendant of the French Huguenot Louis de Bois.
Dubois. I think you could say that Patton came from what you would say is an American blue blood family. Okay, so they were not wealthy, but they were scions of very important families. So he was first posted to the 15th Cavalry in Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and what really made him famous, though, is what happened in the Pancho Villa expedition. I don't know if anyone knows about Pancho Villa. You might have seen some movies about the Old West about him. But
Yeah.
Pancho Villa was, it was more than a bandit. He had become a main leader in Mexico during the Revolution, and he would often come across the border and commit deprivations on the American side. So the American military was tasked to guard the border and catch him if he should cross. And that's where he made the innovation of putting a machine gun on a motorized vehicle. Okay, this is before anyone was even talking about tanks and mobile armored cavalry. So he was an innovator. And this is where his whole career as a tank commander begins in the Pancho Villa expedition of 1915, 1916.
And then his famous signature of ivory-handled Colt single-action army revolver started when his Colt 45 in his belt rather than a holster. His firearm discharged accidentally one night in a saloon, so he swapped it for an ivory-handled Colt single-action army revolver, a weapon that would later become an icon of Patton's image.
So this is where he got those things. So yeah, and so he made the first armored mobile attack in U.S. history against a bunch of bandits, and that's what led to things. So shortly after that, the U.S. enters the First World War, and so when military men have careers, it's usually because some war is going on and they show their mettle.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I know in the movie, George C. Scott quotes some stuff from Patton about how he designed a tanker uniform. Looked like a old Notre Dame football uniform with the gold helmet and everything. And this image that we're looking at on Wikipedia, which is also the show page photo of the topic, is him in his World War One uniform, uh, standing beside his tank that he would drive, which is pretty much the same height as him. That is unbelievable. How do you fit in this?
They were little tanks. The tanks in the First World War were the first time in war they had ever been deployed, and they started as armored cars. As a matter of fact, we call them tanks in English because they're, they were like the metal tank used to hold oil or water or gasoline, um, because tank didn't mean a military vehicle back then, and they attached to like
Yeah.
farm tractor treads to them so they could go over all kind of terrain. There was a lot of experimentation. They were light on armor and light on weaponry.
Yeah. See here, Patton oversaw the training of American troops in Paris until September, then moved to Chaumont and was assigned as a post adjutant, commanding the headquarters company overseeing the base. Patton was dissatisfied with the post and began to take an interest in tanks. As Pershing sought to give him command of an infantry battalion, while in a hospital for jaundice, Patton met Colonel Fox Connor, who encouraged him to work with tanks instead of infantry.
Mhm. Mhm. So he goes on to get involved in a lot of the tank actions at the very end of the war, and he received the Distinguished Service Cross and Distinguished Service Medal, and then once the award of the Purple Heart was created in 1932, he retroactively received the Purple Heart for his wounds in war, and he was involved only in small actions because there was not yet organized large-scale tank action in the First World War. So he stays in the military. He gets promoted up to the level of he gets promoted to the level of general. Let's see, what year did he become a general? He was a lieutenant colonel in 1934. That's when he was promoted. He was transferred to the Hawaiian Division, and he was actually on the Pacific Front and before at the outbreak of the war. It's kind of amazing. He was promoted to colonel on July 24th, 1938, and was given command of the 5th Cavalry at Fort Clark, Texas, for 6 months. And then later in that year, the 3rd Cavalry.
Yeah. Let's see here. Patton also played polo, which also got the president handicapped. Patton continued to play polo and sailing in this time. After sailing back to Los Angeles for extended leave in 1937, he was kicked by a horse and fractured his leg. Patton developed uveitis from the injury, which nearly killed him. The incident almost forced Patton out of active service, but a 6-month administrative assignment in the academic department of the Cavalry School at Fort Riley helped him to recover. Patton was promoted colonel on July 24, 1938, and as you said, given command of the 5th Cavalry at Fort Clark, Texas for 6 months, a post he relished, but he was reassigned to Fort Myer again in December as commander of the 3rd Cavalry. There he met Army Chief of Staff George C. Marshall. He was so impressed with him that Marshall considered Patton a prime candidate for promotion to general in peacetime, though he would remain a colonel to remain eligible to command a regiment.
Yeah, so in 1940, the U.S. decides to organize its first 2 armored divisions. It was put under the command of Adna Chaffee, and he served under him the 1st and 2nd Armored Divisions. And Patton was named as the commander of the 2nd Armored Division. And he kind of won a bit of notoriety by taking the 1,300 tanks and vehicles of the division and driving them from Columbus, Georgia to Panama City, Florida and back in December of 1940. So he was, because that was the only way to practice moving tanks across the country. You had to go down the roads. So I don't think we may have not had asphalted roads back then in that part of the country. So it was a doable thing.
Yeah. I think it was still dirt. I'm not sure when the interstate came to be. So. Then let's see here. Patton led the division during the Tennessee maneuvers in June 1941. It was lauded for his leadership, executing 48 hours worth of planned objectives in only 9. So he did 48 hours worth of work in only 9 hours.
Yeah, so this is what gets him his name. This is why the German high command considered that Patton was the finest general on the American side. That was no exaggeration, as what was shown in the movie. George Patton was really the case. He was an excellent strategist and tactician with armor.
Oh.
He really doesn't get his feet on the ground, however, until the North African campaign, which is in the summer of 1942, when it was the first time American forces landed on the other side of the Atlantic, although it was in Africa, not in Europe. And he was given command of the Western Task Force, which was 33,000 men on 100 ships. They landed at Casablanca on the 8th of November, 1942. And he was fought against the Vichy French there, who had attempted to resist him, but he soon overcame them.
Yeah. Casablanca fell on November 11th, and Patton negotiated an armistice with French General Charles Nigot. The Sultan of Morocco was so impressed that he presented Patton with the Order of Osman Alouet with the citation, Les lions dans les eaux ténèbres tremblent, les voyant approcher. The lions in their dens tremble at his approach.
That turns out coming out to be a good reference to the Germans. So, in the winter of that year, the Allies go on the offensive in North Africa and engage the Afrika Corps of the Germans under Erwin Rommel. And the first battle they were defeated, the Battle of Kasserine Pass on March 6th. The commanding general of that battle was not Patton, it was Major General Lloyd Frendall. And so he gets pulled out, having been shown to be completely incompetent. And then Patton is put on the ground there to oppose Erwin Rommel, who was the partisan commander of the Germans.
Yeah, in that scene part in Patton, when this actually takes place, where that general is pulled out, you hear his vehicle and sirens blaring across the desert. And when he gets there, um, the troops were in for a rude awakening.
Mm-hmm. So he only had command of this force for 11 days, and he so transformed their discipline that in the next battle, the Battle of El Qatar, they pushed the German and Italian armored force back twice, which completely surprised Rommel, how the same unit which was defeated so ingloriously a week before could now come back and defeat them. And this is what seals Patton's reputation as a commander, tactician, a strategist, and a leader of men.
You know, and we get into the Sicilian campaign, and this is where the feud between Bernard Montgomery and Patton really go to town.
Yeah, a little backstory on this. The British, for political reasons, the American government wanted to make the British seem to be equal with American forces, even though the British didn't have equal forces. So Montgomery, the British general, who was a real prima donna, and one of the most incompetent generals that ever served in the British Empire, certainly in the Second World War, his incompetence was led to the deaths of tens of thousands of men unnecessarily. They always wanted to give, Eisenhower always wanted to give Montgomery the easiest tasks or the ones that would win the greatest glory. So Italy is basically the shape of a triangle, and they landed at the southern point of this triangle. And Montgomery had to go up the eastern side along the Ionian Sea and capture the northern point, which was Messina. But Patton was supposed to guard his flank. But no, Patton wouldn't have any. Guard the flank means he'd have to just stay on the west side of Montgomery's forces and make sure he's not attacked them anywhere. But Patton wasn't going to have any of that. He went up the other side of the triangle, captured Palermo at the other point, and then fought his way all the way back to Messina and arrived in Messina a day before. Montgomery humiliating the entire British force. And that really sealed his loyalty with the American forces. He was the toast of all the American armed forces after that.
Oh. Here, all the slap heard round the world.
Yeah. So the thing about Patton was he was brilliant. He was brilliant. He was an excellent military leader, great with his men. He pushed them to fulfill their greatest points. But he was not one, he was not a Freemason. He was not a part of the ruling clique, the deep state that was really controlling everything. So after his victory in Sicily, they knew they had to destroy him. Okay. The Marxists in the press wanted him destroyed because they figured he was a threat. The Freemasons wanted him destroyed because he was not one of them. You can't succeed in a Masonic state like the United States unless you have their seal of approval. Otherwise, they will destroy you. So they started with the so-called slapping incident. And so the first thing we have to understand is people did not understand back then what was post-traumatic stress distress, which was just called in that age battle fatigue or shell shock. You grew up all your life in a peaceful environment, and then you put in a battlefield with bombs are falling everywhere, and your best friend's getting shot to death, decapitated, stabbed, left and right. Some people just break down; they just can't take it. It's just, they lose all sense of personal security, and they just can't take it anymore. Well, Patton didn't believe this was any kind of objective disorder. He felt it was only a lack of courage and fortitude. And I'm not a psychologist, but I tend to agree with him because fortitude is the determination of mind to control and maintain control of your emotions, no matter how much you are physically traumatized. And men with strong fortitude will not come down with post-traumatic stress syndrome, okay? But men who grow up in soft environments and are too sensible to sounds, noises, rumors, they're going to suffer from this. So he figured that by slapping some sense into this guy, he would, cure him of this problem and make him a good soldier. It was very well intentioned. And this kind of treatment had been done with soldiers for eons. That's how you always dealt with it. But the press was on hand, and I think it was engineered purposely, because this soldier who was suffering from it was the only one allegedly in the place for that reason, and it turns out he was Jewish. So as soon as Patton was caught slapping him, it was like, oh, you're anti-Semitic, oh, you're a Nazi. So they set up the whole narrative to go after him, and they never let up on this narrative. To this day, he is attacked viciously by the press for this one incident, because how dare you, a Gentile, slap a Jew? That's what's really behind it, is racism, because Jews don't believe Gentiles are equal to Jews. And so, but it was targeted against him to destroy his career and attempt to, in my opinion, weaken the war effort. And it was a really silly minor thing, but what they put this man through for it, they made him, first of all, they took away his military command. And they basically said he would never have one again. And to take away military command from a man who just slapped someone who suffered from PTSD is insanity. Okay, even the Germans thought it was insanity. Then they make him apologize in public in front of all his troops. That was just totally ridiculous. And you can see that from this one incident, how deeply the Marxists already controlled the entire US government and press, because they're treating him with the same tricks we've seen them use now for 70 years, okay, 80 years, that they attempt to use on Trump. Find some little thing, claim it means something else, and attack, and always demand resignations of their political opponents. And in a certain sense, I don't think Patton knew where this was coming from. I didn't understand how deep it was. But this got him to start opening his eyes about what's really going on in the US government and US society, that there is a lot of malign forces. But he was, he took it hard, these reprimands, and he tried to understand it as, being disobedient to his military commanders, that they were justly criticizing him. But it was all politically motivated, racially motivated, and it all had to do with the kind of control the communists wanted in America.
And let's see. Criticism of Patton in the United States was harsh, including members of Congress, former generals, including his former general Pershing among them. The views of the general public remained mixed on the matter, and eventually Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson stated that Patton must be retained as a commander because of the need for his aggressive, winning leadership in the bitter battles which are to come before the final victory.
That's a perfect statement of Masonic ideology. Masons want their victory, okay, and therefore they'll use anyone who's non-Masonic to achieve that, but they won't give him honor. But they will tolerate you and they will use you for their ends. So if they weren't Masonic, if they were Christian, they would have never taken away his command. And what was done to Patton here led to the deaths of tens of thousands of people. Let me explain. Because Patton had a junior commander called Bradley. And Bradley was an absolute bootlicking nincompoop, okay? And after Patton was punished, Bradley was put in charge of U.S. forces in Operation Overlord, which was the invasion of Normandy. And Bradley was such a jerk, he screwed it all up and got thousands of American men to die on Normandy beaches. And you have been told for 80 years that the Americans died on the beaches because the resistance was so bad. No, they died on the beaches because the jerk Bradley didn't know the first thing on how to do an amphibious invasion and win it, okay? He had men sit on the beaches and being cut down for hours because they weren't yet in a position enough to take the hill, okay? Would have never happened if Patton was in command. Patton instead was given command of a dummy army, a fake army that didn't exist, and they had him wandering all over southeast England to be a distraction to German intelligence, which was the ultimate insult to such a great man than that. It's complete inversion. The capable man's put in charge of a fake army, and the idiot is put in charge of the real one. So I don't have any relatives who were in Normandy, but if I did, I think I'd sue someone in the government now that this has come out, that it was this treatment of Patton that led to the deaths of so many Americans, useless, completely unnecessary, and not even talk about all the thousands of men who drowned if they parachuted into swamps because they weren't dropped in the right zones. But D-Day, which is always in American films shown as a great victory, was a complete failure from the point of view of strategy, in the sense of until Patton gets appointed back, once they realize how much they failed, nothing was going on the beaches of Normandy. They should have been off those beaches within hours and have captured the whole German positions within a few days. 6 weeks later, they're still in, okay, they landed on the June of 6th. Mid-July, they are still near the coast. They haven't done a squat because Bradley was a jerk. Then the high command, Eisenhower, realized, you know, well, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we should have put Patton in charge. Oh, now you realize it. But those men died because of this evil machinations of the Marxists in the press and the Freemasons in the government and in the military. And once they put Patton in charge, then the whole thing changes. You have Patton breaks out so fast from Normandy that the supplies can't even keep up to him, okay? And if they had dedicated all the supplies he needed, he would have ended the war that year, okay? He would have been all the way to Berlin. But they didn't want him to have the glory. So they didn't give him enough supplies, enough fuel. He always had to hold his army back. And it was completely ridiculous. The entire Allied campaign in France was a joke because they wouldn't support the one man who could win it, okay? Because they didn't want him to have the glory. And now we start seeing the really malign intentions of Eisenhower. Because Eisenhower knew that Patton was a better commander than anyone. But Eisenhower was already being positioned by the Freemasons to run for the presidency. And Patton was winning so many victories that they feared that Patton would run for the presidency. And this, I think, is the reason why Patton was assassinated, as we see it goes on.
Yeah.
So this attitude.
Hold on. I think we missed the caller, but Skype didn't ring. So I'm going to see if I can call.
Okay.
Hello, this is Order Militaris Radio TV.
Hello? Yeah, I was told to call in this number for a show.
Yeah. What's your question?
My question is to dial this number and you'll get, I said, get involved in the show and see the show. So I dialed the number.
Yeah. Sorry, Lars. Skype didn't say you were calling. I just now got the message.
I'm calling in to try. Yeah, I saw the topic of today's show, and it looked very interesting, and I thought that by calling in I would get to see it, but I guess that's not the way to do it.
Oh, you just call in and ask the question. We can talk about it.
Well, I didn't see the show, so I don't know. I mean, this show was about Patton, and there was another thing about Malachi Martin, and
Yeah.
You know, very interesting topic, but you know, I read a lot about all of them, so I was interested to see what your take on it was.
We were going through how after the slapping incident, and they decided, oh, we should have probably put him in charge of Normandy. How so they put him back in charge, and how he got his third armor division into gear and started to do what they're supposed to do.
Wasn't he involved in the Battle of Bulge? Was that Patton?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think it was. Maybe it was. No,
yeah.
Patton, did you discuss the issue about Patton's all the allegations that Patton was the automobile accident was an assassination? Was that part of your show?
Yes, it is, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
You can listen by
I'll
going to the website, then you can hear what Singh said.
Okay.
The whole thing, because I enjoy your program, so thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for calling in.
Okay, you're very welcome, and I very much support you. I'll send you some money.
All right. Thank you. Bye. Well, brother, what do you have to say?
No, a good fan. He's way ahead of us. So yeah, so Battle of the Bulge. If you've seen the movie, you know pretty much the details. But the Germans surprised the entire Allied effort, which was based on taking low countries. They left their Ardennes weak, and the Germans just came through with everything they still had left in the German army. And at that point, they realized they better get Patton in, or the Allies are going to be completely cut off, and the war is going to go on another 2 years. And that's where Patton shows his mettle. He turns his entire army around and gets them to force march 36 hours, and they arrive on the scene. And they engage the Germans' army decisively and defeat their armor by outmaneuvering them and causing them to waste their fuel. So a brilliant victory. When I was a young man, my brothers and I, we had lots of war games, strategic war games, and we had the Battle of the Bulge, I think 2 versions of it. And I have played the Battle of Bulge many times, and I know how effective the strategy of Patton can be if it's done correctly. So after winning the Battle of the Bulge, Patton was like lauded. Everyone lauded him. He saved the 101st Airborne, and to this day, I'm sure that unit praises Patton for what he did there. And he's promoted. I think he's eventually gets up to like four-star general.
Yeah.
And but the whole political machinations behind it wake him up and get him to start figuring out what's going on. And he wanted to just go straight on to Germany. The war ran on another 6 months because they didn't do what he said. And when you're a general and you know you could have had victory a year before if your commanders only listen to you, and they don't, it opens your eyes. It makes you ask questions, asks you to start thinking, because normally military men don't criticize their superiors and don't question their motivations. But when you see things like that take place, it opens your eyes. Mm-hmm. So as we would say today, he got red-pilled, or he red-pilled himself. He started investigating what's going on. And he came to understand that the real enemies of America were the Marxists, and the people who wanted to collaborate with them, the Freemasons. And that he took a strong position in the post-war period in Europe, who was still involved in occupation forces, because you had groups that wanted the American army to take land from Germans and give it to Jews, and which is an act of theft, is against the Constitution, as a way of making some kind of reprehension. He stood out against it. Look, he goes, if it was wrong for the Germans to take land from the Jews, it would be wrong for America to take land from Germans, okay? That never belonged to the Jews, okay? So, and there were a lot of shenanigans going on in the time of the occupation. So, but his fame just kept going up and up. He gave more and more interviews, and they constantly tried to fault him for his interviews, because they knew that every time he spoke, more and more people realized that this is a great man, a great American, and that he would be a great president of the United States, because he knew who the real enemies were, the communists. Mm-hmm. And he was willing to forgive the German people, recognizing it's not a national grave skill, which many in the U.S. government did not want to do. And he was willing to, and he wanted to put the entire armed force of America in defending the Christians of Europe from atheist Marxists. So maybe we should talk something about his religion. He was a deeply religious man.
Yeah.
He believed profoundly in the immortality of the soul. He believed in the God, the Creator, and he believed in Jesus Christ. And he despised and detested atheists because he realized they were completely immoral, psychopathic people, and they had absolutely no honor to them. And in denying all these things about man, they really denied the best part of man. So I don't think he was a staunch member of any particular Christian church, but he was a believer. And the Marxists hated him for that, and the Masons hated him for that. And that's what endeared him with the American people, because he had a general strong religious sense. Even in matters of politics, he would speak about topics. They were always trying to catch him in something. So now we get to why he had to be eliminated. He was just the opponent. He had become the opponent of everyone who wanted power in America or power over America.
Yeah.
Maybe we should start and talk about your great granddad. What was his job? What was he doing?
And his job was to make sure the vehicles were ready to go for the next battle, next day battle. Make sure the staff car was ready. And so the night before, he was told about the trip, saying you need to get his Cadillac ready. So he worked on it, got it all ready to go for the hunting trip the next morning, early morning. But I think in the sequel to the Patton movie, it was still very early and had a bit of fog. So then he had the car ready to be signed out by the driver, who was let's see, back to the
So your grandfather was actually mechanic on the car. So he knew that car and he knew it well. What did your grandfather later say to your father about that car? What were some of the things he said or things you observed after the so-called accident?
he said there was no reason for it for the car to be wrecked like that, or shouldn't have had any problems. It was totally secure, and from just going through what I could find out in books and articles, first started out the street was empty as it should have been. Then came the big truck, that hauls that the troops get into, and something caused it to. Then the car collided with an American Army truck at low speed.
Now, what was the truck doing on that road? Did you ever read anything about that? Because usually when people go hunting, they go to a remote place. They don't go down main roads.
I mean,
that's kind of strange.
Yeah. Let's see here.
And let's point out that Patton didn't intend to go out that morning. He was invited invited by his chief of staff, Major General Hobart Gay, to go on a hunting trip. Okay, so this was planned by someone else. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So when that person planned it, whoever was next in line that was told my grandpa, get that car ready. He's like, all right, let me get down to the garage and do my thing. And let's see here.
and by get it ready, he just meant get it in a proper, get it clean and presentable. The car didn't have any problems, did it?
No problems.
There was no problem with the brakes or the steering.
Mm-mm. Let's see here. In one account, this is from General George S. Patton Crash Facts and Information article on it. Patton was riding in his 1939 Cadillac Model 75 with his chief of staff, Major General Hobart R. Gay, all be driven around by PFC Hornets Woodring. Patton was sitting in the back seat with Gay. At some point, a 2.5-ton truck attempted a left-hand turn towards a side road in front of the Cadillac near Neckstadt, Germany. The Cadillac crashed into the truck, throwing Patton violently forward. Patton's head hit a metal partition between the front and back seats, resulting in severe injuries. Gay and the driver, Woodring, were unharmed. Patton was left paralyzed and died of a so-called heart attack or embolism on December 21st, 1945, at the military hospital in Heidelberg. That is the official version of the accident and death. There is much speculation that Patton, due to his unpopular views and political potential, was assassinated by either the USSR or the United States. Now there is another version of the story. Most versions of the story are that fatal accident occurred in his Cadillac staff car pictured above, which shows a pretty darn totaled Cadillac. In the second story, it is said that Patton was uninjured after the crash, where he was transferred to a Jeep, which in turn crashed in a second accident, causing injuries. So it goes on. Mystery surrounding the crash. It is alleged that 1. The name of the driver of the truck that hit Patton's Cadillac and the exact details were never fully disclosed. 2. The second crash. It is alleged that on the way to the hospital, Patton's vehicle was then hit again by a large army truck, causing much more serious injuries. That's all they have.
So in this second version is what's reported in the book about the assassination?
They're both listed in the book by Bill O'Reilly, Killing Patton.
Okay. How could there be two versions? That's very strange.
Yeah, very strange.
The second one sounds like the kind of thing you'd want to cover up, because the second one implies they didn't kill him in the first accident and they tried to kill him in the second. The second version is also suspicious because if that's true and they hid the identity of the driver of the first truck, that sounds like classic military intelligence, because they always hide the names of their operatives. Okay.
Yeah.
That picture of that totaled Cadillac, did your grandfather ever comment on that? I mean, is that a low speeding impact?
From being in a car wreck, I way that fender's all crushed up and the hood's all propped up. Looked like there had to be a serious, collision. Not some 15 mile an hour slow, accidentally bump into something.
Yeah. The strange thing about the first story is if a truck was making a left turn and therefore slowed down, the driver of Patton's car should have kept proper distance and applied the brakes. So it implies the driver of Patton's car was involved, or may have been involved intentionally in causing the accident. Okay. First, the other thing is, in the middle of nowhere, why is a military supply truck making a left turn on a side road? Where was it going? And why didn't they tell us where it was going? Okay. Where did this event actually take place? And why are the names of the people involved hidden?
Yeah.
This all points to assassination, because in an honest event where it's just an accident, I mean, they've been writing accident reports for decades. It's not like they could conceal something like this. And you can be sure a military court should have been called and all those drivers should have been put on court-martial. Well, how did this happen if a general ended up dying in an accident?
Yeah.
Where are all those records after all these years? Why weren't questions asked? Why weren't documents recorded? Okay, so the second one, though, definitely looks like attempted murder, because they didn't kill you in the first, they kill you in the second.
Yeah.
And it looks like he was betrayed by members of his own staff.
Yeah. And learning about true crime and all that on reading mystery books and heart attack or embolism, you could take a syringe full of air and put it into an IV and it'll do just that.
Mm-hmm. I've heard speculation too that he didn't break his neck in the accident. He was shot with a bullet through the neck. Because no one else got any injuries. Why should he all of a sudden get lots of injuries?
Yeah.
On the other side of the argument, we see already in his lifetime he broke bones many occasions. So maybe he had fragile bones. Okay. I'd like to, I don't know how a Cadillac has a hard metal wall between the passengers in the back and the people up front and not padded or anything. And if it's a cold winter morning, he would be wearing warm clothing and a hat or something.
Yeah.
So it would shield his head if he got into impact with anything. And if a truck is making a left-hand turn ahead, the brakes are applied gradually in bringing the car to a stop. They're not slammed on, okay? The drivers for generals weren't newbies right off the boat who never had driven a car. They knew how to drive Cadillacs, okay? They've driven in that area. They would be the best of the best. You're only going to fracture your skull or damage your neck if someone slams on the brakes quickly and doesn't maintain proper distance between the vehicle he's driving and the vehicle in front of him. Okay, so none of this adds up. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't seem explicable. And then put him on a Jeep and get in another accident. It's highly suspicious. The one of the documentaries made about this said that he was really left to die in that hospital. He could have been moved to the States and flown out, but they didn't do that because they didn't want anyone to know what really happened to him, and that the Russians are allowed basically to come in and finish him off with an injection of air, and
Yeah.
they just had to have this guy dead. I should add that polls in the United States who asked people, if Patton ran for the president in the next election, would you vote for him? Showed overwhelmingly more than 60% of Americans would have voted for him as president, and Eisenhower would have never been president. Okay, Eisenhower is a known Freemason, and everything that happened after that in America gets colored by this. This is one of the most heinous events. But the fact that the authorities didn't investigate it, and after all these years, we still don't know what happened. I'm glad Riley wrote that book and dug up all this evidence, because it shows you that in a Masonic state, you're a fool to trust the government, because the government is always manipulated to promote themselves, and innocent people can, by very complex or even simple strategy, be gotten rid of. And you know, a general of his rank, even on a hunting trip, should have a car in front of him and a car behind him. Germany was not yet pacified. There could have been crazies on the road. This guy was a 5-star general already, or 4-star general already. So it doesn't make any sense. Also, because when generals go hunting, they bring a lot of staff go along with them, junior staff, because they want to hobnob with the general and stuff like that. And if it was allegedly to raise his spirits, as Gay claims this interview was about, why wasn't there at least another car there, you know, going ahead of them, clearing the road, especially if the morning was foggy? Now, didn't you tell me that after the accident, they didn't bring the car back to the shop? They didn't show it to your grandfather? They whisked it away?
Yeah, because if they brought it back, you would have noticed something. That's how hands-on he was as a mechanic in the army, and after the army. I mean, you could not get anything past him. If you were in trouble in school, he'd know about it before you got home. So there was nothing that would have escaped him.
What did they tell him about why they didn't return the car?
That's one thing I could never find out. I even asked him, you know, whenever we go over to visit, just to ask him about what happened over there. And a few things, like, on certain missions we had to, you know, swap out batteries, and if there was not a battery for our truck, well, we had to go take one. So, but he never really opened up about why they didn't bring the car back. And
didn't you tell me he felt bad about this the rest of his life?
yes, because he was the guy in charge of the car. He's like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's ready to go for the hunt. Oil check, clean, everything. Signed out, waiting for the PSC Lawrence Woodridge to claim it for the general. And I believe I think it was in the book by O'Reilly that, yes, it was taken away and then destroyed. Well, I believe it was. Then they're like, how can we investigate it? I mean, there was some sort of investigation in all these other documentaries about this. They're like, okay, let's build a replica car. And that's what's at his museum, is a replica car of that Cadillac.
So they destroyed the car, very suspicious. Did your grandfather ever say if he was interrogated after the accident as to what he knew about the car and what its conditions were?
Mm-mm.
No. So, and was your grandfather reassigned almost immediately to some other duty?
Those questions, we don't have answers.
Okay. Mm-hmm. It sounds very suspicious, because if there was an accident, the commanding officer of the carpool would immediately say, I want to speak to the guy involved. Let's have him look at the car. Let's examine. Was it a brake failure? You know, because if it was a brake failure, your grandfather would be court-martialed.
Mm-hmm.
because it was his duty to get that car in working order. So the fact that they don't bring the car back and they never court-martialed your grandfather means they knew that there was nothing wrong with the car, and they knew it without examining the car. Now, how could they know that? They couldn't possibly know that, which means they were already manipulating the scene of the crime. Okay. Your grandfather would probably find out what kind of vehicle really hit that car. Okay. Because since Patton dies 12 days later in a hospital and he's unconscious the whole time, how do we know that Gay and all the people who went with him on this hunting trip are telling us the truth?
Yeah.
They're the only witnesses. Mhm. Did they purposely drive that car into a stone wall and jump out beforehand to kill him? Okay, we don't know. So it's highly suspicious, and
Yeah.
it's just very suspicious, and it achieves so many ends because it gets Eisenhower, the Masonic candidate, into the White House, and he was a big promoter of the military-industrial establishment. The other thing is that if Patton become president, he would have liberated Eastern Europe. He would have gone to war against Soviet Russia when it wasn't powerful enough to defend itself. And tens of millions of devout Christians in Eastern Europe would have never had to live through the horror and nightmare of Soviet occupation.
Yeah.
And especially Catholic and Orthodox. But the Masons threw them like dog meat to vicious dogs. They just gave Eastern Europe over to the atheists in an attempt to destroy, because they got to remember that Masons hate Christianity. Their purpose is to destroy it. And by giving Eastern Europe over to them, that was a way to break down the strongest part of Christian Europe. And so his death served lots of purposes, and one of the great tragedies. But it's an awesome eye-opener to show you that if you want to save America, you have to have a Christian party, because you have to clean out the whole government. You can't trust the other people that are there already. The Kennedy assassination was probably inspired by the Patton assassination. If they could get away with that, they could get away with anything, right?
Yeah.
So.
And Bill O'Reilly points the finger at Wild Bill Donovan,
Now, who is Wild Bill Donovan?
the founding father of the CIA.
He thinks he's the one that arranged it
Yeah.
at the request of.
Like the report, like the stuff we found out. US or USSR.
Mhm.
Because he couldn't definitely say who wanted it, but they wanted him out. Because right when the Germans surrendered, he was like, "All right, fuel me up, give me more bullets and shells, and we're gonna continue on east." That's what he wanted to do. He was like,
Mhm.
"We're not done here yet."
Mhm. So it remains one of the great enigmas of modern American history, and I think there's at least one book and two documentaries about it, and maybe if you on YouTube, I think there's two documentaries you can watch about the assassination or the final days of George Patton, and
I also find it strange why my grandpa didn't want to open up, because you hear all the other World War II veterans open up and share their stories, right? Have books done, TV series done about them, but yet he didn't want to open up.
well, he was probably felt guilty. You know, if they didn't give him a reason why this thing took place and didn't bring the car back, maybe he felt they didn't trust him. But maybe they engineered it to make him feel guilty just to keep him shut up. And maybe he was given a command never to talk about it, okay? Because they did things back then. Most enlisted men were very simple, honest men, and if they were commanded never to speak about something again, they never spoke about it again. And usually when you're being told by your commanding officer never to speak about a thing again, it's because some crime was committed and he's trying to cover himself.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this has been a great set of programs today. We're going to end early, folks. It's just been a long two programs, but great programs. And once everything's finalized on the upload for the radio portion, I'll get it uploaded to our podcast area so I can share the audio for you. Then I'll get it up to YouTube from the video portions. And please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and share this show and share the one on Father Malachi Martin. And I want to thank our caller who called in, even though Skype didn't let us know about it until late, for actually picking up the phone again and taking some questions and answering some stuff and making a donation.
yeah. What was his name? Did he say?
No.
No. Okay. Well, thank you, whoever you are. Good that you're the first one to call in to Ordo Militaris, so radio, TV.
Yep. I'm excited to hear how it sounds after all this and see how it picked up on the video.
Okay. Glad to have been on the radio with you for this live program, AJ.
Yep.
Looking forward to many others.
Yeah. This is Ordo Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.